she was the one that really had this Ouija board thing going. And it wouldn't really move for me by myself, but for her, it would just go everywhere. We're trying to get directions to have a seance and lift the table off the floor. She says, well, what if we put some candle wax on a piece of paper and set it on the baby chair? And then we both walked across the room to the chair. And in the wax, there was an indentation. You know, to be honest with you, my first reaction was, we're going to be rich. I got the fingerprint of a demon.
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today's guest is wise and full of years, and he shared with us the most incredible stories of his life. We talked about how he escaped the Vietnam War and how he was a drug dealer while in the Navy. But first and foremost, he shared the story of when he and a girl he knew collected the fingerprint of a demon. It's another crazy one, so get your popcorn ready and join me in this conversation with Larry.
So I was probably between 16 and 17 because I had a car and everything. And so I would go to, I'd go to my brother's house because I could drink beer there, you know, with him, and it was fine. And so, you know, they had a babysitter because they went out a lot. And I knew the babysitter. It was this girl. And she was the one that really had this Ouija board thing going and introduced me to it. And, you know, you put your hands on this pointer thing and sit across from each other and ask it questions, and it moves around the board to yes, no, or spelling out words. And it wouldn't really move for me by myself, but for her, it would just go everywhere. You know, it's like she was psychic or something. So I was really getting into this with her. And so one night, my brother and his wife went out to a restaurant to have dinner, left the phone number of the restaurant where they were going to be because we didn't have cell phones, of course, in those days. So we're at the Ouija board. We got some candles going. We're trying to get directions to have a seance and lift the table off the floor. That's where we were going.
Had you ever done that before?
No, I had never been into any of that kind of stuff before, you know. I mean, I had somewhat of an interest in, I guess, in the dark side a little bit, you know. I had a little graveyard set up on my dresser at home in my bedroom with Dracula and stuff. I was kind of into Dracula. And one time I shot 3 blackbirds and hung them up outside my bedroom window. And my dad came up one day when I was gone and looked in my room, and when I came home, he said, "What have you got hanging outside your window?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You had 3 dead blackbirds hanging outside your window. What's wrong with you?" I said, "They're just birds." He said, "Get those things out of there." You know, so I had a little fascination, you know, with, you know, Dracula and that kind of stuff. But I wasn't into, you know, any spiritism stuff at all.
Okay, so you get with this girl, this babysitter, which is probably closer to your age because your brother is 7 years older, so there's probably not that big of a difference between you and the babysitter. And she is into this Ouija board thing, but you've never really done that before. So when she says that she's trying to do a seance and trying to lift up the table, what were you thinking? Did you think that was possible?
You know, I didn't know for sure, but I was thinking that, yeah, there was some kind of power available on the dark side. You know, it just seemed to me like that was probably possible. So, okay. You know, I just went along with it, and, you know, it was just, you know, the Ouija board's like a game. You know, people just play this thing like a game. They don't know how demonic it is. And so I had no clue. We were just doing it. And so she says, she asks the spirit, where are you in the room? Are you in the room? Yes, I'm in the room. Where are you? I'm over next to the baby, you know, the tray where they feed the baby, and it sits in the baby chair. So then she says, well, could you like blow out a candle here and so we know you're here. Really? And it says, well, I could, but it would scare you really bad, so I'm not going to do it. And so then she says, well, what if we put some candle wax on a piece of paper and set it on the baby chair, high chair on the tray? Could you put your fingerprint in there? I don't know where she came up with this stuff. and it said yes. And so she went and got a paper towel. We folded it in half. I poured some candle wax on the paper towel, set it over on the tray, and came back. And then she said, well, can we go look? And I said, no, not yet. And so then, can we go look? No, not yet. And third time said, yeah, you can look. We both got up. I turned the light on in the room, and then we both walked across the room to the chair. And in the wax, there was an indentation, clear indentation of something that had pressed into the wax. And it wasn't like a clear fingerprint like you would do with ink on a paper, at the sheriff's office when you get arrested. But it was an indentation of something, like the size of your finger. And there were some lines and some little globs and stuff. So, it was smooth before, and now it's got this indentation of like a fingerprint.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, to be honest with you, my first reaction was, we're going to be rich. I got the fingerprint of a demon. And I thought, we're going to be famous. I was excited. I said, wow, this thing's real, And so we brought it back. And then she said, if you put your finger in there, if there was some excess wax that stuck to your finger, where did that go? And it spilled out on the back. And she lifted up the paper, about halfway up. And we looked on the back, and there was 2 little globs of wax.
There was no one else in that room. It was just you and a girl, and both of you weren't looking.
Just me and the girl, and we were together the whole time. I made sure that there's no way she could have done it or I could have done it. So, I was blown away, and I just was so excited because I thought, man, we're going to be famous. So I went to the phone and called the restaurant where my brother was, because I wanted to tell him I was so excited, And so I called the restaurant, and they went and got, I said, in those days, you just call the restaurant and tell them to get so-and-so, and they'll call their name or whatever. Well, his wife came to the phone because she probably thought that, there was some problem with the kids. And so I told her, I said, hey, we've been playing the Ouija board, and we got the fingerprint of a demon. She's like, what? I said, we got the fingerprint of a demon. You need to see this thing. She said, are you out of your mind? She said, you're going to have demons in the house. They're going to throw the dishes out of the cupboards and wreck the house, I said, what are you talking about? This is not poltergeist, come on. And she said, don't do anything. I'm coming home. They came home. She was all freaked out. She saw it. He saw it. They were freaked out.
So they believed it.
Oh, yeah. Because, they could see it wasn't like one of our fingerprints, wasn't the size and everything. It wasn't possible.
Interesting.
And they had played the Ouija board before just for fun, And so his wife called a friend of hers who was a believer. And they got her over there, and she started casting the devil out of the house, cleaning out the house of these demon spirits. And then she said, you got to get rid of that Ouija board. You're going to have to burn it. It was her great-great-grandfather's Ouija board. It was 100 years old. This thing was like an antique. And so they built a big fire in the fireplace, just a roaring fire. And they slid this Ouija board in on the fire, and fire came up around the outside of it on all four sides, and smoke, and it was hissing and making noise, but it wouldn't catch on fire. It wouldn't burn.
It was wood, right? Is that how it was made?
It was a wood board, 100 years old. It's got to be drier than anything, but it wouldn't burn. Took about an hour before it finally started to smolder and catch on fire. And eventually it burned up. And yeah, that was the end of that story.
That's quite the story. I'm kind of interested because most people wouldn't believe you if you said, I got a fingerprint of a demon, especially nowadays. It would be like, stop it. That's not true. But it's interesting the way that your brother and his wife reacted, that they didn't, well, they kind of believed you in the beginning, but once they saw it, they weren't doubting anymore. So
yeah, that was a very bizarre thing, at that time in my life, because I wasn't doing drugs then. I wasn't doing anything that would, precipitate that kind of a thing happening. But it was just something that happened that night. And yeah, I was, didn't really affect me too much. I mean, maybe it was stuck in my mind somewhere, that, hey, this happened. There's real demons, there's real spirits and all that. But I didn't, it wasn't something I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody. I probably haven't told 5 people in my whole life.
wow. So it didn't change your life at all. It's a thing that happened and then you just kind of moved on. It wasn't that big of a deal to you.
Yeah, it just happened. And, you think, wow, that's weird.
Okay. And so how did your life, so you kind of moved on and like continued living your life. And that was your late teenage years. So that was the 60s. And that was during that time of the Vietnam War, and you were a young adult male. How did that shape up for
Right.
you?
Well, I was in high school, and I graduated in 67. The war started in Vietnam in about, 65 or 64, 65, somewhere around there. And by 67, it was full blown, I mean, it was on. And, I didn't pay too much attention to it at first, but then when I was a senior, it was like, in 1967, and I'm 18, and I realized that they were drafting everybody right out of high school. That you just got drafted, went to Vietnam. And by then it was a big deal and everybody was talking about it. And we were like, even by then, a lot of people were against the war. There was already starting to be demonstrations against the war. I certainly didn't want to go get shot in a rice paddy in Vietnam for what? I couldn't, figure out any, logical reason why I should do that. So, but I didn't really know how to get out of it either. So, my brother was in the National Guard in Portland in a engineering outfit that had heavy equipment. And so he said, well, hey, you're 18 in March. You don't graduate till June. So you get over here and join the National Guard so that when you get out of high school, they'll send you to boot camp, but you'll come back to the unit in Portland because you'll be in the National Guard. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll do that. So I did that. But when I got back from boot camp and AIT and I did my training on the machinery and stuff, I got back, all the machinery was gone. And they handed me a rifle and said, we're training for riot control. We're an infantry unit now. We changed. I said, what do you mean you changed? I didn't sign up for this. They said, well, it doesn't matter what you signed up for. You know, yours is not to question why. Yours is only to do or die. And being the rebel that I was, I said, well, I'm not doing this. And so they'd call my house, and I was supposed to come over for riot control duty because we had a lot of riots in those days in Portland. And I just didn't show up. I didn't go to any weekend drills. I didn't do anything. I just stayed away, didn't go to anything. A year went by. I got a letter in the mail from the Department of the Army. They said, you got 30 days to report to Fort Lewis, Washington for regular Army full-time. You're going to Vietnam. 30 days. Well, I didn't know what to do. You know, some people went to Canada, but it's too cold for me. I don't like the cold. So I couldn't go to Canada. And now we're down to 2 weeks. And I was really getting worried. And a friend of mine that was in the same unit that did the same thing I did, hadn't gone to any meetings for a long time. He got the same letter, and he called me and said, get down to the recruiting office in downtown Vancouver. So I went down there. He was at the Navy recruiter, and the Navy recruiter said, well, you're already in the military. So if you want, you can switch branches, and I can put you in the Navy for 4 years, and I can have you in San Diego in like 7 days in boot camp, and you're in for 4 years, and the Army can't do anything about it. I said, man, give me a pen. I signed right up. 7 days later, I was in sunny San Diego. You're in the Navy now.
And you escaped the Vietnam War like that.
I escaped the Vietnam War for what that's worth. You know, I mean, I don't know if I'd have died over there or not, but, you know, a whole bunch of them did. But yeah, so that was that part of the story.
Did you have any friends that went to Vietnam?
Yeah, I had friends that went. I had friends that died over there. Yeah, it was horrible. You know, it was terrible. I remember when I was in high school, there was a Life magazine that came out. That was a real famous magazine in those days called Life magazine. And on the cover of the magazine was a guy that graduated just a year before I did. And he was on the cover of Life magazine in Vietnam, and he was a white guy, but he was holding a black guy in his arms that had just died. And that was the feature story in that Life magazine. Yeah, it was, you know, the whole Vietnam thing was not a good thing.
It makes me think, because we're talking a lot about war now, and many of us, like me, I'm quite a lot younger than you are, but a lot of people have never lived what war actually is, and it's just horrible. So I don't know. I think it's important to be reminded of the devastation that war causes.
Yeah, it is. It is a very horrible thing. You know, they say war is hell, and that's, you know, that's exactly what it is. You know, there's no way around it. You know, when people are getting killed every day and all this stuff, it's yeah, it's a terrible thing, and it was a terrible thing for us at the time and the country, and it led to, you know, more of the rebellion that was happening with us at the time. You know, as young people, we were fighting against the war, and you know, and going into the hippie times and the drugs and all that. It was just fuel to the fire, you know.
And talking about drugs, because you went there, you got in the Navy, you got enrolled in the Navy. I don't know how many years you stayed in the Navy, but eventually, at some point in the Navy, you started dealing drugs while you were enrolled.
Yeah, I signed up for 4 years because that was the deal that I had to do, was 4 years active duty. But amazingly enough, because of the war, so many people were trying to get in the Navy that I actually got out 8 months early because so many people were trying to get in. They started letting people out early to let more people in. And so while I was in the Navy, I started doing drugs kind of in the high school in my senior years, where I really kind of got introduced to drugs and started smoking weed and taking some speed and that kind of stuff. So when I was in the Navy, most of the people were experimenting with drugs at that time. And then we had ships coming back, aircraft carriers coming back from Vietnam. I was at Miramar Naval Air Station at San Diego. And so the aircraft carriers would come in and out of there. So these guys come back from Vietnam crews would bring back all this weed from Vietnam. So yeah, we started doing the drug thing while we were in the Navy, and then we started selling around and making contacts on the outside. And so by the time I got out, we were pretty well established with, buying and selling.
That sounds crazy because it seems like something that would not be possible now. Maybe it is. I mean, I'm not in the Army and I don't deal drugs, so I have no idea. But it seems like this was a very different reality back then than what it is now.
Yeah, this was the transition years of going from, like the 50s to where not too much of anything was happening into the 60s. And throughout the 60s is where the whole world changed. This is where everything changed. The music changed, the culture changed, the hippie thing started, and that hippie thing just exploded and just, went nationwide. And, Woodstock was in 69, right? So everybody was tuning in, turning on, and dropping out. That was the saying. And so because it had just kind of started, the Navy wasn't really prepared for, this drug thing. And so in the beginning, they didn't know what to do. So, but, later on, of course, they, started kicking people out for doing drugs and all that stuff. But in the beginning, when I was in, it was nothing. I mean, we grew marijuana right outside the barracks windows in the bushes, just grew the plants right there. I mean, it was just normal.
If it was like that in the Navy, it was like that also for civilian life. And when you got out of the Navy, you got 8 months early. When you got out, you said you had made contacts outside of it and you were still dealing drugs outside of the Navy.
Yeah, when I got out, I didn't know really what to do. And so I just stayed there. I stayed in San Diego because I loved the weather and everything there. It was a wonderful place to be, had beautiful beaches and all that. So, so I just stayed in San Diego, and then I got together with two guys and we kind of formed our little trio of, dealing drugs and stuff. And we worked together. And then we got a nice apartment down on the beach. And then, that was kind of our headquarters right there. And that's where we worked out of. One guy was a manager of a big grocery store. So we used to go shopping there and we'd spend like $300 on groceries, salmon and steaks and wine and beer and all the best food and stuff you could buy. And he'd charge us like $20 at his cash register. And he did this for a long time.
And what did that look like before all the regulations and before the war on drugs? Because it was a different reality, like I said before, but it was a lot easier to get away with it.
Yeah, some people got busted for stuff, but 95% of the time you didn't have to really worry too much about. I mean, one of these guys, his brother lived in Missouri, and he'd steal a car in Missouri and he would drive straight to San Diego and sell it at a chop shop. where they chop the car up and send it across the border into Mexico and sell the parts or try to put it back together, whatever. So he'd make about $5,000 off of, the car he stole. So then he'd always come by our place and buy $5,000 worth of weed or hash or whatever. And then we would ship it air freight, right to his house. And the airline would deliver it in their van right to his house. We'd just buy brand new suitcases in the box and take it out of the box, open it up, fill it up with kilos, put it back, wrap it up, put stuff around it, put it back in the cardboard box, take it to air freight in San Diego Airport, and ship it to this address. And most of the time, they didn't even ask what it was. One time they said, "Oh, do you want to insure it?" We said, nah, it's okay. And the guy said, "Well, what is it?" And it's like, we were shocked. We didn't know what to say. And somebody blurted out, library books. I almost started laughing. But, nobody said anything. And that's just the way we did it. And it was, it was super. No dogs at the airport, no scanners, no nothing. It was just, it was just easy.
That's crazy for me to hear because it's so different than everything that I've been used to. But I want to go back because I know that your mom played a big role in your life, but we haven't heard too much about her. So can you explain how your relationship with your mom was? Because I don't think she agreed with what you were doing. So what was her take and how did that relationship work out between you two?
Yeah, my mom was a believer, but my dad wasn't. My brother wasn't. Of course, I wasn't. So, early on, she had taken me and my brother to church. And I don't know how many years we did that, but, I heard many, many sermons more about hell than anything else, really. But, I had heard it all. The pastor came every Sunday night and said, "Larry, you want to get saved tonight?" And I said, "No." And, this went on and on and on. And then my mother, she was trying to get us saved, of course. And so she was trying in her own way. And so she did all this crazy stuff to try to get us saved and invite the pastor over for lunch. And he'd walk in the front door. My dad walked out the back door. She'd throw tracts in my car with my friends when they came over. And, she just did all this stuff. So, yeah, it was very difficult because, she didn't like me smoking and drinking and carrying on and doing all this stuff. But she kind of had a breakdown, I think, because she was doing all this stuff. And she kind of had a mental breakdown when I was in, my start of my senior year. And I came home one day and my dad said, "Hey, your mom's up in your bedroom, says she's going to jump out the window." And so I went up and talked to her, and she was like so depressed and everything. And then one day I come home and she was out in the back porch with a butcher knife, kind of slit her wrists and stuff like that. It got pretty crazy. But my mom, somehow she started to come out of that, and then she got in a real bad automobile accident, almost killed her. She was in a hospital for a month. And then when she was recovering, she'd just read the Bible every day. Just read the Bible every day, all day. Pray and read the Bible. And, somewhere along the line, she figured out that maybe she should just let go and let God and quit trying to do all this on her own. So at some point, she gave the whole family to God and quit praying for us and just believed that we were all saved by faith. And that was it. She just stopped all the craziness. And of course, everybody, saw it. And I thought, wow, what happened to this lady? She just stopped all this stuff all of a sudden. So it was pretty radical change in her life. And she just started loving on us and being nice to us. Didn't matter what I did, or, she was just nice to me. So that was pretty bizarre. But here's one thing she did that we'll come back to at the end. She was going to a Bible study on Wednesday nights in Portland. And she told the people at the Bible study about how she had changed and all that. And so she said, I just believe that they're all saved and serving God and all that. So one lady in the meeting said, well, if they're all saved and serving God, why aren't they here? She said, well, they are here. She said, you just can't see them yet, but they're here. Believe me, they're here. They're here by faith. And there happened to be 3 empty chairs sitting next to her at this meeting. And she said, in fact, I'm saving these 3 chairs for my family. And she put a piece of paper on each one, reserved seating. And they said, okay. And about a year later, my dad got saved.
Wow.
He came to the Lord because my mom had a incurable disease from the accident, and God healed her. And when God healed her, he said, okay, that's the kind of God I want to serve. He got saved. About a year later, my brother went to a meeting with them on Easter Sunday, and for whatever reason, he went forward at the end, got saved. So now they're both saved. They're sitting in their chairs, but there's still one chair.
Yeah, there's you still missing.
There's me. And there is no chance that I'm ever going to end up in that chair. Right? No chance.
Yeah, no chance.
So now I'm down in San Diego, and I'm going to be there forever. That's my thinking. And so I'm just partying and selling drugs and going to rock concerts every Friday night and just doing all this stuff. And it's pretty crazy. And one night, everybody else was just passed out on the floor, and I was sitting there looking around, and I thought, wow, is this really it? Is this life? It's like I had money. There were girls around all the time, and there was drugs, and there was parties, and there was rock concerts, and I had a nice VW Bug, and it was like, and I wasn't really into the drug thing for the money. I wasn't into the money. I was just into the drugs to be high, because I liked being high, whether it was on acid trips or whatever. And I just thought, I've got it all. This is what everybody wants, right? Everybody wants to have money and parties and all this stuff. But I felt like, there was still something missing, and I couldn't figure out what it was.
And there's a lot of people that feel like that today too, that they work towards a goal and eventually they end up achieving what they wanted. And then they realize it's like, I'm still empty. It still doesn't feel good. And then many times what they'll do is they'll place another goal higher. They're like, oh, when I get this, then I'll be happy. And they keep on reaching these goals, but it never makes them fulfilled, never makes them happy. So you were in that position. But what happened after? Because that's a big turning point in your life.
Yeah, that was kind of the very first time that my thinking began to kick in. Up to that point, it was just, routine, day by day. We did what we did, and that was life, but now I had, I was starting to kind of have some different thoughts, and I was actually I was getting a little bored with that life, which is kind of crazy because it was a pretty exciting life, but I was just kind of getting bored with it. It was the same old people and the same parties and the same, same thing. So I don't know. We had a big party one night and we were breaking up the kilos and putting them in the baggies to sell and doing that whole thing. And that was always a big party night. So at the next party, before it even started, I just told my friend, I said, hey, I'm going to go down to the beach and take a walk. I'll be back later. And I went down to the beach. I'm by myself. There's not hardly anybody at the beach. And it's just about sunset time. So I sat down in the sand by myself. I watched the sunset. And it was peaceful. It was quiet. And I was just watching the ocean and the sun. And, it was just like all of a sudden, it was so amazing to me, this beautiful picture in front of me. I was just blown away. And I didn't really know why, but I was just, mesmerized by this thing. And, the sun went down and then it got dark and then the moon came up and the moonlight was shining on the water. And there was these little, ripples of water with the moonlight, and they looked like electric eels swimming in swarms in the water. And I was just so relaxed and peaceful. And I really enjoyed it so much that the next night I went down, did it again and again and again and again. And the days turned into weeks and the weeks and the months. I don't know how many sunsets I watched. It could have been over 100. I don't know. But wherever I was in the afternoon, as soon as I saw the sun was starting to head down, boom, I was at the beach. So one evening, I'm watching the sunset, and I hear this voice inside say, why do you keep coming down here every single night to watch the sunset? And I said, man, it's just so peaceful, and beautiful. It's the only peace I know is here. And I can think, I can actually think. So, then a few nights later, it's like, well, why don't you just watch the lights of San Diego when, after the sun goes down? I said, San Diego's lights are nothing. I said, it's not beautiful. I know what's going on in San Diego. It's a pit, I said, no, I want to see the sunset. So this went on for a season, and then finally the voice said to me, well, who made San Diego? I said, man made San Diego. They built the buildings, they built the roads. It's a no-brainer. So I was feeling pretty good that I was able to answer all these questions, right? A few nights later, we went through this whole thing again. And after we got to the man-made San Diego part of it, the voice asked me, well, then who made the sunset? And I was like, what do you mean, who made the sun? What, are you kidding me? It's just there. What do you mean? Nobody made it. It's just there. And then the next night, who made the sunset? I said, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. Well, think about it. So the next night, who made the sunset? And finally, it got to the place to where I said, okay, if man made San Diego, man could not have made the sunset. It didn't come from a cosmic dust in space or a monkey. And so that only leaves one more option. And I said, okay, maybe God made the sunset. And then I was like, God, did I say that? What are you talking about? You don't even know if there is a God.
You were very against it, and your mom was a believer. Now, your father at that point, I believe that during that time, your father and your brother were believers also, but you never wanted to do anything with it, and you never were a believer any point, if I'm correct. You just were like
No,
your dad,
no, never.
just living the party life, drugs. Never did it cross your mind that like you would have said that, and all of a sudden you kind of like had a realization that that's kind of the only option there.
Yeah, I ran out of options, and even though I said it, it wasn't like maybe I really believed it at the time. But the thing is I was looking right at the sunset as this was going on, and I'm going, well, there it is. It's right there. You know, it got here. Somebody had to make this thing. And so then it was like, I said, okay, there has to be a God. There has to be a God. There's no way around it. But, that wasn't enough, but it was a start. And so I conceded that, okay, there has to be a God. And then the next thought came, and this one just wiped me out. The next thought came, and I thought, what if these people that are all believers in God, what if those people are right? And what if I'm wrong?
That's the question. There's a lot of people that today that are thinking that all people that believe in God are crazy. This even more than ever, because atheism is the biggest that it's ever been. But a lot of people don't stop and ask themselves that question. What if they're right?
Yeah, and when that thought came through, it was like I saw, oh my word. If they're right and I'm wrong, then the majority of this world is wrong. And a small minority over here is right. And I mean, I clearly saw this distinction between these two groups, and I was in shock. I mean, that thought shocked me. And I remember I said, okay, wait a minute. You better get back to the party. You are one toke over the line. Maybe your mind is really fried. Maybe the drugs and all this stuff. Maybe you're cooked out, or maybe your mind is freaking.
Yeah, and what happened after? Because there's a lot of things that happened between that time and the person you are today. Obviously, this is a long time ago, so there's been many years between you coming to Christ and you today. But where did you end up eventually after that thought crossed your mind?
I went back to the apartment, and some things were happening with these other two partners of mine, and they were having some problems. And so I said, look, it was almost Christmas at the end of 1971. And I said, okay, I got to get out of here for a while. I'm going to go up north for Christmas back home. So I left. I went home, and I was living with some hippies. And one day I said, okay, I got to find out what the deal is. I know there's a God. I got to find out if this Jesus thing is real. If it is, okay. If it's not, then I'm going to go back and get involved in some bigger drug deals. So one morning I was taking a shower, and I said, okay, Jesus, if you're real, somehow you've got to show me, or whatever, that you're real. And I don't know what to do, but I remember parts of this sinner's prayer, right? And so I started to say what I could remember of this sinner's prayer, that, okay, you must be the Son of God. So, okay, if you're real, I'm going to invite you into my life. Forgive me of all my sin. And I just went through this whole list of all the things I could ever remember. And about a second after I shut up, I just felt like a trillion tons of black garbage just lifted off of my life. I mean, just physically, I felt it go. I thought I was going to float away, and everything got bright, and something happened, and I didn't know what it was. But I thought, my mom knows what this is. I know she knows. So I went out to her house, and I came in and I said, "Hey, Mom, I got to talk to you." And she said, "Yeah, what's up?" I said, "I think I just got saved." She said, "What?" I said, "I think I just got saved." I don't know, but I prayed that prayer, like, and so, of course, we had a great time of rejoicing. And yeah, that was January 18th, 1972. I was born again.
And it's fun that you talk about your mom right now, because it's going to circle back to what we talked about earlier. Because for most of her life, up until that point, your mom had tried to kind of like beat you up with a stick to go to Jesus, and tried all these things for you and your brothers, your brother and your dad, to get to Jesus and to give your life to God. Nothing worked. But when she got in that car accident and she let go of that responsibility, of that weight, she just said, "God, I'll let you do it." And then even that incident where she was leaving these three chairs at the meeting for you three, believing that you would be there. It's at that point that things started to change, when she stopped trying to do everything herself. And your dad got saved, your brother got saved, and even you got saved with all the things that you were involved in. So I think it's very interesting to tie it back together with everything that happened with your mom, because I think there's a very important lesson there.
Well, yeah, while I was talking with her after I got saved, that morning, uh, she said, "Well, son," she said, "this is Wednesday. Just happened to be a Wednesday." And she said, "Your dad and your brother and I go to this meeting on Wednesday night. You want to come with us?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." So we went to the meeting. We were a little late. There was about, I don't know, 30 people there or something in this big basement room this guy had at his house. And they were still talking and chattering, when we walked in. Well, when we walked in, everybody shut up. And they were staring at me like a deer in the headlights, And I was going, well, I know my hair's down past my shoulders and I'm wearing a trench coat and bell bottoms, but I am a human, They're just all staring at me. I'm going, what? So my mom says, "Here, I got a seat saved for you." She takes this piece of paper off the seat, and I sit down. And it's just so quiet. And so the guy opens up with a prayer. And then he says, "Well, we got a guest here tonight. You want to stand up and introduce yourself?" So I stood up and said, "Well, my name is Larry, and I just got saved today." And the place just went berserk. I mean, they screamed and hollered and carried on, and just freaked me out. I thought, what is wrong with these people? But I didn't know, that my mom had said that we were all there when we weren't. But, we were going to be there because that's what she believed. So I didn't know that part of the story. So, that was a really awesome thing. Very powerful, faith story. I would like to share one other thing that shows how important it is for us to believe for our families and our loved ones. After my mom had given us to God, believing that we were all saved, I got in a terrible accident, and the pickup I was driving landed on top of me in a ditch. And, there was a death in the accident, and it was a mess. And the ambulance driver was a friend of mine from high school. And he told me when I was in the hospital that if the truck would have landed a few inches either way, it would have crushed me to death underneath. But the way it landed, just exactly the way it landed, it didn't crush me to death. But they thought I was dead, so they treated everybody else first, and then they came over and the truck was at such an angle they were able to push it up enough to drag me out. But I was still alive. I had a broken jaw in 2 places and a brain concussion and some other stuff. And I don't even remember the accident. My brain concussion just wiped it clean. So, I read about it in the paper. It was like reading about you getting in an accident. But later on in life, maybe 20, 30 years later, I was praying and worshiping God at home. And the Holy Spirit said, I want to show you something. And immediately I saw this vision of this accident. And I saw the truck. I saw me fall out of the truck, land in the ditch on my back. I saw the truck coming down. And as the truck was coming down, I saw a demon on one side and an angel on the other. And the demon said, he kept pushing the truck over so that when it landed, it would kill me. The angel kept pushing the truck back to where I would live. And they went back and forth as the truck came down. Well, when it was, a little ways away from my body, it went into super slow motion. And the demon pushed it over to where it would kill me and said to the angel, you cannot have Larry because he is not born again. And the angel said, you're right. He's not born again. But his mother believes that he is. And he pushed it back over and bam, down it came. And I'm here to tell the story. That's how important it is. It's life and death. It's life and death.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Almost False podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more interviews like this. If you found this content valuable, please share it with a friend. It really helps us out a lot, and hopefully it will help them too. If you want to be on the show, you can go to almostfalse.net and submit your story there. We would love to hear from you. With that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your day and stay blessed.